AR scope mounts, short barrel competition rifles, and case trimmers this week on Mail Call Mondays. Mail Call Mondays is sponsored by Modular Driven Technologies. If you need a chassis system for your precision rifle, check out mdttac.com. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and our first question this Monday is from Austin. And Austin asks, AR height one-piece scope mounts. What are your picks for the low budget and one for the higher end? The Spuhr is great, but there are lots of options out there. As always, thank you for your outstanding content and dedication to our industry. Take care. Well, Austin, I'm glad you mentioned the Spuhr mount right off the bat, because if we're talking about the top-end mounts, the Spuhr is definitely going to be my pick. Now, this that I have right here is a Spuhr SP4002, and the height, it's a 34 millimeter ring height or ring diameter, and the height is appropriate for ARs because it works very well with the flat tops here and gives you just a little bit of clearance underneath a large bell scope. That way you can still put scope caps on and all that kind of stuff. It's really a heavy-duty mount. You've got 6 scope cap screws for both sides, and you've got the really innovative Spuhr mounting system that allows you to add rails like this 45-degree rail that I've got here if you need to be able to add laser rangefinders or a dot sight or anything else off to the side. And you've actually got Spuhr interfaces on the caps. You've got Spuhr interfaces on the side and even down here at the bottom. So it's really a very versatile mount, and it is really probably the highest quality scope mount that we've come across. I think the Spuhr just does an absolutely phenomenal job with their machining and with their finishing. They really are works of art in metal when you take a look at them. But all that does come at a cost. So Spuhr mount like the one that we just showed here is about $410 for a mile-high shooting, so they are not cheap. They're pretty expensive, and if you are not sticking a top-end scope in it, you may have trouble justifying that price point. So if we move down the price point just a little bit, an AR mount that I've had a lot of success with is the Oddland Engineering Odd Mount. It's AAD is how they spell odd. And we'll leave a link to all of these down below in the description. This mount, I kind of have pros and cons about it. For one thing, it works very well. It's designed to work on AR-15s, and it has the cantilever design, so if you don't have a one-piece rail on the top of your rifle, then you can fit this mount far enough forward that you get your proper eye relief and that you can have the scope turret placed appropriately, or the turret housing placed appropriately forward without actually having to bridge the gap with your rings or with your mount. So it's a really nice design there. They did skeletonize and cutaway area up here, so they're trying to save as much weight as they can. And even inside the base of the mount, they have meat cut away between each one of the lugs to try to minimize the weight. And then finally, it does have a bubble level built in, so that is a really nice setup overall. The odd mount has a 6-screw cap up front, and it does have a 4-screw cap in the rear. Now the spacing is a little bit wide on this mount, and I did find with some of these smaller scopes you do run into problems getting it spaced out and getting the proper eye relief and getting the turret housing and the bell where it needs to be. So you just have to kind of be careful about that. And on Oddland Engineering's website, they do have dimensions so you can see what the clearance is between here. But we have at least one scope that this really will not fit in because it's got a chunky turret housing, and that pushes the mount too far forward, and it ends up, it would be trying to clamp down on the back of the objective bell, so that just really wouldn't work. Overall, a really nice setup though, and these guys run $279. So again, really nice fit and finish, good job, and they are made in the US. Now, if you really are pinching pennies and you just need to get your scope mounted up, you don't want any frills, any extra stuff, you don't care if the edges are a little bit rough or maybe the finish isn't perfect, then we can go down to the absolute bottom tier of stuff that I would trust. And SWFA, they produce some really great scope equipment, really great accessories. They have their salt mount, and that's what I have here, and this is mounted on an old Millet TRS-1. I just demo it. The salt mount is another cantilevered AR mount, so it's designed specifically for ARs, and like we mentioned earlier, the mount is set back here so you can get the scope forward. As I'm trying to knock a rifle over here, you can get the scope forward and you can get enough eye relief to be where you need to be on a AR-15. Now when you go up to a large frame AR, you have a little bit more room to work with up here, so cantilevered mounts aren't really a necessity very often on those rifles. Once you get your buttstock out here, you can get the scope to actually be completely on the upper receiver. Even if you have a gap, you don't have a monolithic or a one-piece design. Anyway, back to the salt mount, and that's SSALT, and it is from SWFA, and we'll leave a link down below. This guy comes in at the really affordable $59 price point. Now, it is not as finely machined as either of the other ones. It pretty much pales in comparison when you look at the Spuhr mount and then you look at this. There are spots where the machining lines aren't straight. There are spots where the coating is not perfect on it, and they just use these big acorn nuts here to secure the cross bolts and the mounting plate. You don't have any extra machined lugs in here. The cross bolts double as the lugs, but if you are putting this on a relatively low recoiling AR-15, they are good to go. I don't know that I would go with this type of mount on something like a 300 Win Mag with a heavy tactical scope on it, but for the application that you're talking about, you know, even 308 ARs, I think this is going to be just fine. We have used this mount for various different scope testing, and it hasn't caused us any problem at all, although I generally prefer to spend a little bit more money on a mount. But if you're in that point where you really are trying to hit a price point, then this is the mount that you need to be checking out. So those are my recommendations for low, middle, and top tier scope mounts. So that's sub $100, the sub $300, and then the $400+ price points. So that's my recommendation, but I really want to hear your recommendations. What mounts do you think are viable options in those price ranges? So go ahead and leave those down in the comment section below. And Austin, I hope that gives you some ideas of things for you to look at. Our next question comes from Tim, and Tim asks, would a short barrel in the 18-inch range be beneficial in a PRS match? This would be in terms of movement and positioning. Well, Tim, the rifle I have in front of me is my 6.5 Creedmoor Ma 10, and this is finished out with a 24-inch barrel on it. So it is a fairly long overall rifle. If we brought it back to that 18-inch area, then yes, the package would be a whole lot easier to maneuver in and out of the barricades. I would be a little bit quicker getting from position to position. And any situation where we have to deploy it like from a trunk or from inside of a vehicle or move through a shoot house with it, then a shorter barrel would definitely be a benefit. But the really important part with shooting PRS or competition rifles is hitting the target. And when you start to stretch out to those longer range targets, while that shorter barrel may have been a benefit getting into position, that shorter barrel is going to equate to more wind drift and of course also more drop at longer ranges for the same power levels. Then you're going to run into that vicious circle where you're going to want to run your ammo hotter or run your loads hotter to be able to get more performance out of it. Then you run into reliability issues. So it's just a circle that you get into when you start trying to cheat and go to those shorter and shorter barrels. really, I don't find it that the long barrel on this is a hindrance in those matches. A shorter barrel would be quicker, but the longer barrel I don't think is tying me up. It's not causing me issues. And that is on an AR, where traditionally the longer barrel means a considerably longer overall system than a bolt gun. Bolt guns just seem to be a little bit more compact for the same barrel length. So that's really my opinion. I wouldn't go to a short barrel just solely to make it more maneuverable. And now, the maneuverability is one of those reasons that I don't often shoot competitions with a suppressor on the front. I've started shooting more of them running suppressed just for the experience and because I enjoy shooting suppressed rifles. But when you take a rifle like this with a 24-inch barrel and then you hang an 8-inch suppressor on the end of it, you now have a really long overall package, and threading it through ports on a barricade or through ports in an obstacle really becomes a chore because you have to come way back and then way forward. As you can see, I've got a barricade stop right here on this rifle, so I'm having to pull this much of the rifle out, and if we have a suppressor, even more off camera out before I can thread it back in and get back on that barricade stop and go again. So in the end, it's going to be up to you. But I think the benefits of a slightly longer barrel, that 20, 22, 24-inch length, outweigh the maneuverability of a shorter, like 18-inch barrel, especially when you start talking about 6mm and 6.5s. You can get away with it a little bit easier in 308s because you're handicapped to begin with a 308, and you will be shooting in a pretty much a different class with the 308. You won't be going up against the race guns that are shooting really fast, really flat. So that's just my opinion. Those of you guys that run short barrels, why did you decide to go with the short barrels over a longer barrel? And those of you guys that maybe looked at it and then decided to go with the longer barrel, what's your opinion on it? Again, there are many different ways to skin a cat. There are many different ways to approach these competitions, and that's why I really like the open class in the various different matches, because you do get to really set up your rig however you think you need to set it up to best address the situation. This rig kind of changes little by little. The barricade stop down here is a new thing for me. It's just a really cheap UTG key mod barricade stop. But I saw it at one of the local matches. Another guy had it running. I believe he was running on the side of the rifle. And I just threw it underneath here to see how well this works at our local match this month. I think it's going to give me a little bit of a benefit because I've got the Really Right Stuff Arca plate back here, and that is not a very good barricade stop. It's too low profile. It will ride up over it. So this is a much larger piece, but it's small enough that it won't interfere with the tripod if I decide to lock the tripod on here. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. And of course, I will come back and report to you guys how well this worked after I get a chance to shoot it. And our last question comes from Chris. And Chris asks, John, love the videos. Keep up the great work. It helps us all. My question is, when you're loading in large quantities, I get bogged down trimming cases to length. Is there a faster way to trim them? Well, Chris, I too really hate trimming cases. It's not just the trimming, it's the trimming, the deburring, the chamfering, the cleaning the case necks, all that fun stuff. It really does slow down the process. So first of all, I really don't trim unless it's necessary. So there is the trim to length in the loading manuals, and then there is the max case length. So what you want to do when you have to trim is make sure you trim all the way down to that trim to length. That way you've got some room to grow back up to that max case length, and that should limit the number of times that you actually have to trim your brass. With some cartridges, depending upon the shoulder angle and how much charge you're going through, you may not really have to trim them very often throughout that case life before the case is trash. I have some 6.5 Creedmoor that has only been trimmed once, and the primer pockets have started to open up on it, so that stuff is going to be trash before I actually have to go through and trim it again. But in trimming, what you want to look for is you want to look for a trimmer that both trims to length, chamfers, and deburrs all in one step. So you just want to grab that cartridge, you want to put it in there, you want to trim it, and be done. You don't want to have to trim it a little bit and measure it, trim it a little bit and measure it. You want it to be pretty much as close to a one-step operation as possible. And then additionally, what I'll do after that is I have a case brush, or a bore brush rather, appropriately sized for the case mouth, on a rotary tool. It's the RCBS Trim Mate, and I'll just run the neck over that, and that's pretty much the extent of case prep as far as that's concerned. What I have been using lately is the Henderson Tri-Trim. We did a review on the Tri-Trim. Henderson now has the Gen 2 out, which makes things a little bit easier because it eliminates the issues with fire-formed brass versus full-length size brass. We had some problems with that when we initially reviewed the Tri-Trim. So the new version actually will work for either, and it is quite a bit more adjustable, so it's easier to switch between cartridges. The thing is that Tri-Trim, though, is $360, and that's for one setup. Now, the new one, you may be able to get quite a few different cartridges trimmed with, or quite a few different cases, case types trimmed with that one setup. But if you go to vastly different cartridges, or if you go with different case neck diameters, then you're going to have to buy extra pieces for that. Another really interesting product that is on the low end of the price spectrum that I haven't got a chance to try yet are the Little Crow Gunworks World's Finest Trimmers. I know some of you guys out there have tried them and have talked to us about them. I just haven't got a chance to purchase one yet and get it in and try it out. Those guys run about $72, and it's really really nice because there's no setup involved. You just chuck it into your drill, you run the case in, it trims, chamfers, deburrs, etc., and you're done. Now the drawback is, of course, since there is no setup involved, then you are really slave to the trim to length that they've set, and again, that's going to be indexed off the shoulder of the case instead of off the base of the case, like the Tri-Trim or like my RCBS trimmer or some of the other products out there on the market. But the advantage is, if you want to get through things quick, or if you're switching over between cartridges quickly, then you just chuck that thing up in a drill, you run it, and you're done. You unchuck it when you're done, throw it back in the toolbox, and that's it. You do have to get a different trimmer for different cases. You can't really adjust them to work over a wide variety, at least not easily. They advertise them for a single cartridge, and then that's what you're stuck with that trimmer. Now, if we go all the way over to the other end, the Cadillac of trimmers is the Girard Power Trimmer. I have used those in the past. A friend of mine here has them. If I have to do a really large volume of brass, like I've gone over with piles of 308 before to run through his trimmer, that thing is the way to go. It works pretty much like an electric pencil sharpener. You just turn the thing on, you grab your case, you stick it in, you give it a little twist. It trims, chamfers, and deburrs to length. It is adjustable for various different things, and it does have different case holders, different cutters, all that. So you can swap between various different cartridges without a ton of trouble. It does take some adjustment to get things set in, and I honestly don't know how easy it is to go quickly from case to case, because I haven't had to go through the setup. The last time I went over and used it, I just called him and told him what I was going to come over and trim, and he already had set up by the time I got there. That, though, for one setup, one cartridge, they run $460, so that is really, that's about as expensive as you get for something that's just trimming, deburring, and chamfering your brass. The plus side is you can go through a lot of brass really quickly on it. You grab yourself a utility glove that's got some rubber gripping surface on it, and you can just grab cases, twist them through there, and go, and you can knock out quite a few hundred rounds of brass while you're just sitting watching TV. It takes absolutely no user input. You don't have to measure anything. You don't have to pay attention to anything once it's set up. You just bottom the cases out and twist them. Again, it does index off of the shoulder, but it is adjustable. So if you've got it set up for your specific rifle, then that's not a big deal. Or you can just make sure you full length size before you run them through, and that's good to go. But those are a couple of ways to speed it up. Trim only when you really have to trim, and then find a trimming process that will allow you to trim, chamfer, and deburr all in one step. That's the easiest way that I've found to deal with it. Hopefully, some of you guys out there have found a little bit easier ways to go, or maybe more economical ways to trim, chamfer, and deburr your brass. And I'd love to hear about them, so go ahead and drop them in the comments section below. That's it for this Mail Call Mondays. I know this is a short episode, but we've got a lot of stuff going on. We're trying to get it out really quick, so that's the reason we only went through 3 questions. But if you guys have a question that you'd like to see answered on Mail Call Mondays, go ahead and leave it in the comments section below, or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you guys are listening to Mail Call Mondays on your favorite podcast app, you can send questions to us at 854-1tactical@gmail.com. If you like the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, get out and shoot. Now we do have a 6 screw cap here at the front and a 4 screw cap here at the back. That's my dog barking in the background, by the way. He is barking in his sleep. So there's that.